Well, Sean Spicer is the incoming White House press secretary, a very powerful man joining us this morning. Good to see you, Sean. Happy New Year.
Good morning. Happy New Year.
And congratulations. I don't think the three of us have formally congratulated you on that new role.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's an honor.
So tell us a little bit about the whole Russian hacking deal. You were on ABC yesterday saying that President Obama took too long and hasn't gone far enough. But do you believe that Russia was behind hacking?
Well, it's not a question of what I believe, Ed. It's a question of what happened. And I think there's an intelligence report that's due out later this week. And once that report is made final and the president-elect is briefed, then I think we'll have a better idea of what to make of the situation. But rushing to judgment on stuff like this is not in anyone's best interest.
But hasn't the CIA, pardon me, but hasn't the CIA and FBI already issued their own reports suggesting through the DHS that, in fact, Russia was behind the hacks? Even if you don't believe they influenced the election, weren't they involved in the hacks? Do you at least agree with the intelligence community on that?
I think, you know, this is the report that you're referring to. It came out the other day. It's 13 pages. And frankly, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, because hacking is wrong. People shouldn't be interfering in anyone's, in not only elections, but in any kind of hacking. But that 13-page report is more of a how-to manual for the DNC as to how they can improve their IT security. It talks about how they were a victim of spear phishing, how there needs to be more staff training, administrative rights need to be changed, passwords need to be updated on a regular basis.
Sure, they should have done a better job. I get that. But was Russia behind it, yes or no?
But a question, there's a difference between whether they're behind. Look, there's a lot of, probing is the actual word when you go out and try to go to various sites. Whether or not they were hacked and they did anything is a completely different story. The way the mainstream media is playing this up is that they had an influence in the election. Yeah. There is zero evidence that they actually influenced the election. And I think that's what we've got to get away from, is allowing the narrative to become whether or not the DNC and other entities didn't have lax security, and whether or not there was an entity that actually influenced our election.
Sean, you mentioned the president-elect alluded on New Year's Eve that there would be new information coming out. Is this a report you're talking about, or is there information the administration has specifically that may show a different perception one way or the other?
Well, I think what the president-elect is referring to is that he gets briefed on a daily basis on different threats and issues facing this nation by his national security team and by other members of the intelligence community. So he is privy to information that nobody else is. But what I think what he is driving at is the fact that there doesn't seem to be conclusive evidence within the intelligence community. There are people who believe certain things, but what we're waiting for is this final report to whether or not it is actually conclusive or whether or not there's just general belief that that's the direction they think this thing is in.
Sure.
All right, so a new year, a new administration coming in, a new cabinet potentially coming in. They still have to go, many of them, through Senate confirmations as a heated battle seems to be brewing on Capitol Hill. Senator Chuck Schumer, for example, he's vowing to make life miserable for some of Mr. Trump's cabinet picks, including the Secretary of State nominee, Rex Tillerson. How ugly do you think this is going to get? As Ed mentioned earlier on the show, you have Mr. Trump who said, behind closed doors, my relationship with Senator Schumer is actually much better. We figure out a way to get along.
Well, I think there's two issues. One is this cabinet is probably the most qualified and star-studded that we've seen in modern history from one end to another. The people that are coming into this are going to bring real change. But on a political side, it's really disappointing. And Chuck Schumer understands this of all people. When President Obama came into office, the Republicans confirmed 7 of his nominees before he even was sworn into office, and 5 of them were consumed the following week, for a total of 13. So for these Democrats to now talk about how they're going to obstruct these qualified cabinet members from taking office is rather sad. And I think Chuck Schumer, of all people, he was there then. He understands that there's a difference between opposing people on policy and allowing people to have the president to have the constitutional right to choose his cabinet as long as they're qualified. And each one of these people is unbelievably qualified to serve and to bring real change to the various departments.
Speaking of Democrats, I mentioned you were on another news program yesterday. After your appearance, Donna Brazile was on, the DNC chairwoman. This is someone who gave, while she was at CNN, leaked questions for town hall forums and debates to the Hillary Clinton camp, as you know. And she said on that program that she and other Democrats deserve a seat at the table with President-elect Trump. What do you think about her saying that?
Well, I would argue that not so much because of their office, but President-elect Trump's goal is to unify this country and bring anybody together that wants to help move the country forward. You saw that when he met with the tech titans from around this country, Facebook, Google, Amazon, all these people who, frankly, openly opposed him. But at the end of the day, he understands the importance they play in creating jobs and moving economic growth forward. He wants to bring people together, whether or not they opposed him or not, to move the country forward and implement an agenda of change. So if Donna Brazile has ideas or other leading Democrats, and we welcome that. We want people who share this idea of moving the country forward to be part of it, whether or not they're Republican, Democrat, or Independent.
Sean, so much of Mr. Trump's ability to move his message has been to go above the mainstream media, using a Twitter account or other means to speak directly to people. We got to ask, because it's been a lingering question of mine, and we've talked about it here. Does the president-elect keep at real Donald Trump, or does he inherit at POTUS, which the President of the United States uses, and will he be tweeting from that after January 20th?
I think he'll probably be tweeting from both or whatever he chooses. He's the president. He understands.
So they're going to give POTUS over. They're going to hand over the password.
Oh, they have to. Absolutely. It's a government handle, so they have to. But at the end of the day, look, he understands the power of social media. He's got 45 million plus people that follow him on the various platforms that he controls. He understands the ability to go straight to the American people and have a conversation with them. Now, I know that is unbelievably frustrating to the mainstream media, but that's what makes him so authentic, is he can speak truth to power on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, get a message out and have a conversation with the American people and not have to have it filtered through the mainstream media.
Is it filtered through you? Do you have to approve before he tweets in your new role?
Nobody approves anything that Donald Trump says. We work for him, we serve him, not the other way around.
All right, so he hinted over the weekend when talking to reporters that maybe a guest at the inauguration could be Benjamin Netanyahu. Any thoughts on that? Can that be confirmed?
I don't think it's going to be confirmed at this point. I would refer you to the Presidential Inaugural Committee, but I can tell you that there are a lot of world leaders he's spoken to, over 75 of them, who are expressing a sense of new hope that this administration is going to give them a voice and an opportunity to talk about things that maybe they haven't been able to talk to with this current administration for the past 8 years. Call after call that he's having have this sense of refreshingness, of wanting to establish a relationship where they feel like they've been put on the sidelines for the last 8 years. And under a Trump administration, we're going to reassert America's place in the world and really have a relationship with our allies around the country in a way that we haven't for the last 8 years.
Yeah, maybe an actual reset.
Well, Sean Spicer, we appreciate you coming in. Happy New Year.
Thanks, guys. Happy New Year.
Good to see you.